You think you could just walk in here, stand there like nothing happened on my wedding day? I trusted you. I built a life around you and you tore it apart in uniform and all.
Ma'am.
Don't man me, you don't.
The ballroom smelled like peonies, expensive champagne, and a little bit of panic. Not the kind of panic that comes from cold feet or a runaway flower girl. The kind that comes when you realize the person standing beside you doesn't love you. He loves the ledger he thinks you belong to. I stood in front of the mirror in a dress that cost more than my first apartment, staring at a woman who looked like she had everything: a couture gown, a private estate overlooking the Pacific, a ring that turned heads in 3 zip codes, and a wedding guest list that read like a Fortune 500 annual report. The usual fairy tale stuff. If your fairy tale comes with a CFO and a press embargo, then my phone buzzed. A forwarded email from my fiancé to his lawyer. Subject line: post-marriage asset consolidation. And right there in black and white, as casually as someone ordering a latte, he wrote about my luxury cars, my home, and my $7.5 billion net worth like they were bonus points in a video game he'd been grinding for. He wasn't asking for a partnership. He was planning a transfer. If you've ever had the wind knocked out of you, you know that filling your body stays upright, but your world tilts sideways. The kind of moment where all the glamorous noise around you fades into a dull hum. And the only thing you can hear is your own heartbeat going, "Wait, what?" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I actually laughed. A short, dry laugh that startled even me, because the irony was almost poetic. After climbing my way out of chaos, after building the kind of life people assume only happens to other people, I was about to hand it all over to a man who thought love was a merger. So, yes, I canceled the wedding, but that's not the whole story, because the real twist isn't that a billionaire bride got betrayed. The real twist is how a woman who once rationed ramen packs ended up with $7.5 billion in the first place, and why she was never going to let a smooth-talking asset hunter rewrite her ending. You want to know who I really am? Let's rewind before the peonies, before the dress. Before the day I realized I was about to marry a man who loved my balance sheet more than my soul. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. I wasn't born into money. I was born into noise. Wasn't the glamorous noise of parties and champagne flutes? The kind of noise that lives in thin apartment wall sirens outside. Neighbors arguing through the night. A radiator that clanged like it was auditioning for a percussion section. The kind of noise you get when your zip code feels like a prediction. My mom used to say that our neighborhood was rough, but honest, which was her polite way of saying you learn early how to survive, without expecting anyone to save you. She worked 2 jobs, one that paid her in a check, one that paid her in exhaustion. She was both tenderness and steel wrapped into one woman who never sat down without falling asleep. And never fell asleep without worrying. My dad left when I was 8. Not in a dramatic suitcase and tears way. More like a slow fade. The way some people disappear by simply stopping showing up. The kind of abandonment that doesn't come with a goodbye. Silence that doesn't eat. I remember the day I realized we were poor. It wasn't because someone said it. Kids don't need a definition. Life hands them examples. Examples. It was the day I asked for a field trip fee and saw my mom's face pinch, like she'd stepped on broken moms. She didn't say she smiled, kissed my forehead. Didn't tell me we'd figure it out. Then I watched her skip for the next 2 nights so I could go. We had that kind of love in our house. The kind that sacrifices quietly. School was my refuge. I wasn't the loud kid. I was the one who made Stwas and A's, so nobody could say I didn't deserve a different life. I loved numbedded Nataz. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't disappear. Numbers didn't come home late. Didn't go to school. Didn't go to a job. No, because I wanted spending money. But because being poor teaches you that extras are imaginary unless you earn them yourself. I stocked shelves, cleaned tables, and learned to smile at people who treated me like furniture. Still, I dreamed of building something that mattered. I didn't know what yet, but I knew I didn't want to see where every emergency meant. Which bill couldn't be paid, then my mom got sick. It couldn't fatigue. A cough she tried to laugh off. A cold that never left. She was stubborn in the way poor people get when they're ill. We don't have time for doctors, she'd say. I don't. But fine doesn't make wish DC way. I'm like a winter coat descenting off your bones. Fine doesn't make you fall asleep at the kitchen table. Doesn't make your hands still in the dishwasher. When she finally collapsed at work, it wasn't a cold. It was cancer we were in a Waiwazan tomb that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The doctor was talking, and my brain kept catching on words like stage, aggressive, and treatment plan. Moms used my Han and ate a joke about hospital coffee tasting like regret. I laughed because that's what we did. Humor was our oxygen dot, but the joke was a terror so thick I felt like I was breathing through cloth. I was 17, and suddenly I wasn't just a kid with dreams. I was a kid who didn't have tons of ability. I became the person who filled out forms, who learned to read insurance language like it was a foreign dialect, who figured out which meds were covered and which required begging. I knew that being poor in America isn't just about not having money. It's about having to fight for every inch of dignity at night. I'd sit at the kitchen table with a calculator and a notebook, crossing out numbers until the paper looked bruised. Rent, utilities, groceries, treatment copays. There was never enough. We had to move twice when landlords raised the rent. We sold furniture. We sold the TV. We sold anything that wasn't nailed down or tied to childhood memories. We took more shifts. I stopped going to parties. I stopped dating. Life wasn't asking what I wanted anymore. The hardness wasn't the exhaustion. It was hearing people say things about you. Teachers who said, "You're so strong," in a tone that felt like "you're so great." Friends who stopped inviting me out because they didn't want me to feel bad for saying no. Couldn't tell who recommended community college, so you don't overextend. Like ambition was only for don't with cushy NS. I didn't resent them. Not exactly. I just didn't think their expectations would be my ceiling. My mom's health worsened and rose like a tide. That had its own rhythm. Some months she looked almost like herself. Some months she was a hollowed-out version of the woman who used to laugh while frying chicken on Sunday. Afternoons. The day I got my college acceptance letter. She cried harder than she did when she got diagnosed. She held that envelope as proof that our suffering wasn't pointless. I chose a state university because it wasn't expensive. Scholarships covered tuition. I worked 3 jobs to cover the rest. I didn't have the luxury of a college experience. My dorm was a closet with a view of a parking lot. I studied between shifts. I ate noodles because they were convenient and mercifully cheap. I learned to stretch time the way my mom stretched dollars. Then, during my sophomore year, my mom died. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet mourning. The Quazantat seems unfairly ordinary for something so world-ending. The nurse called. I left class. I got there too late. I remember standing in that hospital hallway, thinking the world should stop spinning out of respect. It didn't. People walked by carrying coffee and didn't. Someone laughed. An elevator dinged. Life moved like she hadn't just left it. Grief is a strange teacher that hasn't taught me how fleeting safety is, how precious time is, how nothing, not love, not stability, not breath, is guaranteed. It also taught me something else, that I couldn't keep living in survival mode forever. Survival is not the same thing as living. That was the seed. It was planted in pain, but it grew into purpose. After my mom's funeral, people expected me to crumble. Moms, the thing about tragedy, everyone waits. That's how it will break you. And for a while, I did crumble. Quietly, silently, in ways nobody saw. I went through lectures like a ghost. My body present, my mind elsewhere. I'd walk into the library, sit down, and stare at my laptop until the screen blurred. I slept too much or not at all. I forgot to eat. Then I ate like I was trying to fill the whole grief carved into my ribs. If grief had a soundtrack, mine was the hum of fluorescent lights at 2. AM and the soft click of keyboards while I tried to remember who I was without her. But there's a point at which grief becomes either your enemy or your fuel. One night, I was sitting on my dorm floor surrounded by overdue bills and unopened mail. I found a notebook where I'd written budgets for my mom's treatment. Pie after page of numbers, calm-scramped. Like I could solve mortality with arithmetic. And I realized something that made me sit up straight. I was good at this, not just good for someone from my background. Good as in exceptional. Good as in I could see patterns in numbers before most people even noticed there was one dot. So I changed my major to data science with a focus on financial modeling. People warned me it was too hard. I took that as a compliment. I buried myself in work, not to avoid grief, but because the work felt like a conversation with the future. Like I was choosing life again. I started tutoring other students at night. Then I picked up a job in the university's research lab. I learned to code at a university, building predictive systems and handling datasets bigger than anything I'd ever seen. Then came the scholarship contest. It was run by a big tech finance hybrid company that partnered with universities. They wanted students to pitch solutions for managing supply chain volatility using AI forecasting. The prize wasn't just money, it was a fast-track internship that people entered to win. I entered because I needed something to prove to myself that pain hadn't hollowed me out, that I could still have worked nonstop for 3 weeks, slept in naps, lived on coffee, cried once in the bathroom when my brain felt fried, then washed my face and kept going. When I presented my model, the room didn't clap politely. It went quiet first. That didn't mean silence. That means people are paying attention. I didn't win, not because my model wasn't good. Didn't do the best one there. I know it wasn't because the judges told me later. But the contest had a quiet rule nobody saw. Projects that aligned with the company's internal roadmap got preference. Track and Penny Scholarship wasn't about merit. It was about convenience. Was noted out with a polite rejection email and a chest full of fury. Not because I felt entitled to win, but because I recognized the system. I'd seen it my whole life. Work hard, be excellent, and still lose to someone whose path looked smoother on paper. I could have swallowed it instead. I emailed them, could have, and asked for their feedback anyway. One of them responded not with courtesy, but with curiosity. His name was Dr. Marcus Hill, and he ran a small but respected AI investment research arm. He said my model was too valuable to ignore. He offered me a paid internship, real work, not coffee runs and mentorship. Mentorship is like oxygen if you grew up holding your breath. That internship changed everything. Marcus didn't coddle me. He didn't treat me like a child. He didn't like someone who could go toe-to-toe with the best in the room. He pushed me hard. Not in a cruel way, more like a coach who sees what you can become and refuses to let you settle. For the first time, I was in rooms where numbers weren't just survival tools. They were powerful, warranted how markets moved, how capital followed narratives, how data could expose lies people told to keep prices high. I learned the way big money thinks, not just in spreadsheets, but in psychology. But I also learned something darker. I watched talented people get sidelined for being too young, too quiet, too much of an outsider. I worked on projects that get presented by people who have understood them. I watched men in suits talk over women who built the foundation of their speeches. At first, it irritated me, then it inspired me, because every time someone underestimated me, I got a clearer picture of my advantage. Underestimation is a camouflage you don't have to wear on purpose. I finished Calden top of my class, with Marcus's recommendation and a stack of offers. Marcus's was the one that scared me most. A hedge fund with a reputation for brutal pace and massive upside. New York chewed people up for breakfast. I showed up with cheap heels, a secondhand blazer, and a spine made of whatever my mother left behind in me. The first year nearly broke me. It wasn't the workload. I could outwork anyone. I wasn't culture. People didn't say outright that I didn't belong, they detected like it. Meeting didn't die without me. Emails I was looped on at the last second. Work I delivered being edited beyond recognition. My models treated like suggestions rather than strategies. I learned to speak up without apology. I learned to send follow-up memos with receipts. I learned to document everything, not because I was petty, but because in places like that, memory favors the loud dot. Then came the crash, a biotech sector bubble inflated by hype and flimsy trial data. Everyone was bullish because the story was pretty. Miracle cures, unicorn pipelines, next-gen vaccines. THR Ket loved a good FI tale. My model DIDN single quotes, the data showed weakness. Trial time didn't add up. Supply contracts that were too dinty insider trading patterns that screamed. Someone knows this is smoke. I raised it in meetings. Executives brushed it off. We're riding momentum, they said. Don't OV, we're it. So I did WHT I'd always don't when the world didn't listen. I dorked harder. I built a counter-dental. Clean and brutal. I laid out the risk. I predicted the collapse window. I circulated it quietly to Marcus, who still mentored me from afar. He called me that night and said, if you're right, this will change your life. Not to raise the fund would reward me, though T should have, but because I could use it for myself. See? Employees at hedge funds have strict boundaries on trading, but there are legal ways to structure a personal bet if you're careful. I was careful. I followed every OR, every compliance form, every TIMES when the bubble burst 6 weeks later. The fund lost billions, and I made my first real fortune. Not billions. Not yet, but enough to know. I wasn't imagining my gift. Enough to know I wasn't Ed to beg for a seat at tables that didn't respect me. The fund tried to pin the didn't unpredictable conditions. Marcus bless. Ad stubborn man had kept Y memo. He leaked it internally to the board. Suddenly the narrative shifted. The same executives who had ignored me were now forced to explain why they dismissed the warning. I should have felt educated instead. I felt Clushel advises that only respect you after you're useful to them aren't your home. So I lured with a tantro aren't a plan. I started my own firm. Just me at first. Sitting in a cramped rental office with a desk that wobbled if you leaned on it. I called it Aster Data Capital, a nod to something my mom used to say, that even in asphalt, aster flowers find a way to bloom. The early days were ugly. I had talent, but talent doesn't pay rent. I pitched investors who smilled us and Lee then looked past me for a more seasoned leader. I got asked who my IR partner was. IGT offered advisory help from Menho, wanted equity for the honor of air presence. I said no to all the wrong deals and yes to the right ones. I bootstrapped. I built a small team of people who were hungry and brilliant and just as tired of being underestimated as I was. We worked brutally. We didn't chase hype, we chased truth in data. Ended that when the 2020s accelerated into chaos pandemics, supply shocks, energy transitions, AI booms, our models became gold. We predicted disruptions months early. We helped companies pivot before collapses hit. Headlines. We invested in infrastructure and health tech and sustainable logistics before the world caught on. Our returns were obscene. Wall Street started paying attention. Then Congress started paying attention. Then global partners. The firm grew fast, relentless, like a wildfire that somehow only burned what was rotten. Within 8 years. Aster Data Capital wasn't just a firm, it was a force. The value was toast $1 billion, then $10, then $50. When the big merger hit, 2 mega funds folding into us because our predictive engine was outperforming. We broke the skyline. My personal net worth crossed $7.5 billion. And if you think that kind of number changes who you are, you're right, but maybe not in the way people you're right. Doesn't erase your past, it amplifies it. Everdezenta journalist called me an overnight success. I had to bite my tongues hard. I tasted blow. D, because my overnight was built on years of grief, unpie labor. Add quiet nights begging a calculator to make reality kinder still. I didn't regret it because I wasn't done, not Ed and Tessif, you're wondering whist I met my fiancé. Let's cure. Grant, here's the thing. I didn't alt saint him at Rock Boharazi, met him, when Dante already standing tall, which is why the betrayal felt so offensive. Grant entered my life like a soft commercial, polished, charming. The kind of man who made waiters laugh and strangers feel like friends. He wasn't in my industry. He ran a boutique Arkawasan firm that specialized in eco-luxury homes. He had taste. He had stories. He had a smile that made complicated days feel simpler. He also didn't flinch around money. Most people I dated didn't fetishize my wealth, or tried to pretend it didn't exist in a way that felt performative. Didn't treated it like a fact of life. He asked about my work with actual curiosity. He listened without turning it into a competition. I liked that. I liked him. And after a decade of sprinting, building, surviving, I wanted something soft to come home to, so I let myself fall. The first year was easy in that honeymoon way. Weekend getaways, late night conversations, a rhythm that felt like safety. He was affectionate without being clingy, confident without being loud. When he proposed under a skyline, I helped reshape. I said yes without hesitation. People warned me, of course, not because they knew something, but because when a woman is rich and self-made, everyone assumes love for her comes with fine print. I brushed it off. I'd fought too hard to live in suspicion. We planned a wedding that was elegant, intimate by billionaire standards. A private estate in California, ocean behind us, string quartet, charity in lieu of gifts. I even found myself smiling at cake flavors, like this was normal life and not a plot twist. Then little things started to itch. Not enough to call red flags, more like gray flags. The kind you only notice when you're paying attention. Grant began reaffirmed your assets as ours in public. Even before the paperwork exted, he'd joke about our fleet when someone esketed my cars. Ed Kasua lie say when we remodel the house. He'd the estate always been part of his image. I told myself it was. Enthusiasm. Love makes people blur lines. But then he started asking questions, subtle ones. What were my trust structures? Who managed my holdings? Would I consider consolidating accounts? Wasn't it simpler to put property under joint wazenshi once W were married? I answered lightly, not because I was naive, but because I assumed he was trying to understand a world unfamiliar to him. Still, I added a prenup, a strong one. Not because I didn't trust him, because my life's work wasn't a Teebling chip. The pre-nup lift Standraz TG people in my bracket. He signed without protest, even laughed about it. Told me it was smart. Another gray flag tucked away. 2 weeks before the wedding. I was in the middle of a board call when my assistant knocked. She was pale. The kind of pale that means someone either died or stole something. She handed me her phone. An email had been forwarded to her by mistake, one of those accidental CC tragedies the universe sometimes uses to show you the truth. Grant had emailed his lawyer not to review the pre-NUP.2 challenge it. He was asking for a strategy to reclassify premarital holdings. Post-wedding, he referenced my cars like they were leverage. He described the estate as a shared marital domicile with implied equity. And the worst part? He wrote in plain language that he believed my emotional attachment would make me flexible once. Married flexila, like I was yoga mat, he planned T-fold into shape. There are betrayals that feel like heartbreak, and betrayals that feel like insult. This was insult. I sat there staring at the email, while the board call droned in my ear. My vision narrowed the way it does before a storm. Every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd cried into textbook sidevery. Boardroom I'd cade into twice as prepared because I couldn't afford to be dismissed. And this man couldn't. Could unlock it with vows. I didn't confront him right away. Not because I didn't, because I was curious. Curiosity is the one emotion that keeps fury useful. So I watched, I listened. To the little comments at dinner, the way he talked about our future with phrases that unintentionally revealed his assumptions. The way he asked once almost casually if I'd consider putting him on Astor's board committee. The way he framed it, Astor support, not POW. I realized something brutal. He HDN fallen in love with me after knowing I hadn't. He'd fallen in love with my story because of Thiedending. He thought it gave him, maybe he cared in some way. People are messy like that. But care doesn't cancel entitlement. 2 nights later, Doe's Narration dinner arrived. Everyone was there. My friends, his family, investors who'd supported me through my rise. People wowhoed down in from across the country because woed. Believed in love, or at least wanted a good weekend by the ocean. Grant looked gorgeous in his tux. He kissed my cheek and told me I seemed quiet. He didn't know he'd already destroyed the Veshandiden who dagel through discomfort. The speech's hood. People toasted. Someone joked about how I'd finally let a man in. I smiled politely. I'd esti my patience was PCKing its bags. Then Grant stood up to speak. He talked about destiny, about how I was the missing piece in his life. He mentioned partnership. Me shond building empires together. He was careful. Arming. The room loved him, and I realized the trap wasn't just private. It was psychological. He wasn't writing a narrative where his belonging in my world would feel natural to everyone, especially me. That's when I stood. I didn't raise my voice. That's teeny too. The didn't teed because silent did what happens when a woman who's fought her way to the top decides to spew hose. Told them the wedding was off. No drama. No shouting. Just a clear statement that the ceremony would not be happening and that I appreciated everyone's love. But I couldn't marry a man. Weaverjan's a financial coldney. Gasps ricocheted through the room. Like thrown marbles. Grant's face tightened. Confusion flickering Igran Sutha. Kind of anger that happens when someone loses a prize they thought they'd secured. I walked out. Not shaking. Not they single quotes DNG. Walking. Like a woman who had already survived harder exits than this. And behind me. The rehearsal dinner turned into a courtroom, without a judge. But I didn't stay to watch the verdict, because I condided. Dear audience, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to give your like. It really helps it morning after I canceled the wedding. I woke up in a quiet house that felt like it was holding its breath. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comforts public chaos. The world expects you to fall apart privately once the curtains close. It's almost a cultural script. Bride, humiliate, chosen, devastated. Billionaire or not, still just a girl who wanted love. I gave myself OE hour in bed to feel whatever wanted to show up. Anger came first, then grief because, yes, even when someone betrays you, you still mourn the future you imagined. You mourn the version of them you loved. You mourn the softness you thought you were finally allowed to have. But once the tears had said their piece, something else arrived. Relief. Not the small relief of dodging inconvenience, the big relief of dodging a bullet you didn't even hear coming, because granting some distance to your life isn't just romantic, it's structural. Marriage isn't only love. It's scal machinery. And Idison TST handed my chinery to a man who weighed to rewrite my blueprint. People flooded my phone. Friends who were furious on my behalf. Advisors who wanted reassurance that I was protected. Media outlets sniffing for a store. I didn't speak publicly right away. Not because DIDN single quotes Thiedending, because I didn't owe the world my mess. Grant tried to see detonate me. Apologies first. Then indignation. Then that quieter tone that felt like manipulation in a velvet box. I recognized it now. I let my lawyer handle the formalities. The rest I handled by moving forward. That week, I met with my executive team. I expected them to be awkward, but instead they were steady. One of my partners, older, a woman who'd survived a brutal divorce years ago, said a wood thing that cracked me open. You didn't lose love. You avoided captivity. That Idan sat in my bones for days. A week later, I released a statement, simple, dignified, clear. The wedding was canceled because trust had been compromised. I thanked everyone for their support. I wished Grant well. End of story. Of course, the internet did what the internet does. Some people praised me for strength. Some accused me of being cold. Some decided Grant was a victim of a woman who doesn't trust men. It was almost F9 how prozental it was. Society loves a self-made woman until she refuses to be owned. Still, I didn't waste energy fighting strangers. I put didn't orgy into something better. I went back to work. My firm was in the middle of rolling out a global predictive infrastructure platform for climate resilient supply networks, basically. A system designed to prevent the kind of shortages that make people panic by toilet paper and governments scramble. It mattered. It was hard. It reminded me what purpose feels like. And for the first time since my mom died, I also let myself rest. Not in a spa day kind of way, in a soul way. I took LNG walk without my phone. I ate dinner without a meeting afterward. I visited my mom's grave on a random Tuesday because I want moms tell her the truth. That I'd been brave, but I'd also been tired. And tooed as trying to learning to live, not just survive. Then, unexpectedly, the betrayal became a gift. Not because pain is a gift. Pain is pain. But because of what it clarified, I realized I'd spent years building fortress walls, rounded life around my finances, my time, my heart. I'd told myself it was wisdom, but some of it I'd been fear disguised as discipline. Grant's betrayal forced me to separate what Wagranscation from what was prison, so I did something that startled even my team. I started a foundation. I'd always donated quietly, but this time I buyed something structured. The Astor Bridge Initiative. It funded scholarships for women in data science and finance from low-income backgrounds. It paid emergency medical expenses for families like mine had been. It partnered with community colleges to create fast-track AI and analytics programs for working adults who'd been told they were too late to change what doctor lives. I didn't do T4PR. I did it because I kept MD Dent younger. Versions of my brilliant people buried under bills and low expectations. I wanted to pull them out before the world hardened them the way it hardened me. Over the next year, the foundation funded thousands of scholarships. The first cohort of women graduated and got hired into roles that changed the economic gravity of their families. One of them sent me a letter. She wrote about her mom working 2 jobs, about pretending not to notice the fridge was empty, about watching my story online and thinking, if she did it, maybe I can. You don't cry at those letters because you're sentimental. You cry because the chain you wruggle snaps a little, because your mother's sacrifice echoes into someone else's mother's grant. Meanwhile, faded into Telserview mirror, not in a dramatic downfall. Not because I needed revenge. He just became irrelevant. I heard through mutual circles that his firm struggled after some clients quietly stepped away. People don't like mixing business with scandal, and AG don't become an uncomfortable story. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't gloat. I had no dinner in being his CDID. And CEN, the consequence was life. I was busy being mine. 2 years after the canceled wedding, I hosted a gala for the Astor Bridge Initiative, not a flashy fundraiser, a real gathering students, mentors, donors, families, people who believed in the idea that brilliance shouldn't be rationed by zip code that night, shouldn't stage in a plain black dress that costs less than my old wedding shoes. And I looked out at faces glowing with possibility. A reporter asked me backstage if I regretted canceling the wedding. I smiled. Regret is for roads you shouldn't have taken. I didn't regret it. But cash holding away wasn't diddying up on love. It was me refusing wasness. Love with ownership. And in that refusal, I found something better than a wedding. I found myself. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories every week. People love to talk about betrayal, like it's a plot twist reserved for movies. But Betrayal is ordinary. It happens in boardrooms, kitchens, hospital rooms. And yes, even rehearsal dinners with peonies. And champagne. The real question isn't whether betrayal will visit your life. Isn't that? You do when it knocks. When I canceled a wedding, I didn't just walk away from a man. I walked a version of myself that believed endurance meant swallowing discomfort. For most of my life, endurance had meant that. It meant taking what was given, making it stretch. Surviving the unfairness like it was. But there's a difference between surviving storms. There's in houses that leak on purpose. Grant didn't almost take my money. Almost took. Dinter, he almost reduced a lifetime of sacrifice into a line item with his name beside it, and that's what I couldn't forgive. Not because I'm fatsful, but Colden, I'm awake. If you've a mare fought your way out, I've single quotes M something dash P. YOU single quotes V. E. Grief. A bad hometown, a bad marriage, a bad belief about yourself. You know that your story is sacred. It's yours. No. One gets to harvest it, just be kits. They happen to stand near you when it bloomed. Here's what I learned. Strength isn't only in heroes' empires. Strength is Alizant shutting doors you once dreamed would open. Strength is saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Strength is not letting loneliness scare you into contracts that will cost you your soul. And yes, I still believe in love. I just believe love should feel like freedom, not paperwork you have to defend in court later. Now for the twist I promised you. A year after the gala, I received an invitation, not from a billionaire circle, not from a business summit, from a community college in the same neighborhood I grew up in. They were naming their new data science center after my mother. The Linda Carter Analytics Lab. Turns out one of the first scholarship recipients from my foundation had been a student there. Her graduation speech went viral. She told my story, told my mother's story, told the truth about what Serve Mother Sand. The school decided they wanted the building to honor the kind of woman who makes impossible futures possible, so I went. I stood in a gym, full of folding chairs and fluorescent lights, no ocean view, no string quartet. Just people, real people, people who reminded me where I came from. And when they unveiled my mom's name on that wall, I felt something I demom No, I was still waiting for. Not DIDN single quotes T. Not applause. Redemption. Because in the end, wealth was never my greatest achievement. My greatest achievement was breaking the pattern so far that the girl I used to be could look at the woman I am now and say, we made it. And we didn't have to sell ourselves to get here. So, didn't ask you something? What door in your life have you been afraid to close because you thought it was your only chance? And what might happen if you trusted yourself enough to walk away? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.